Okay, good morning. For me, this is kind of like morning coffee. I'm waking up. I'm on my second cup, you could say. Basically, spiritual physics, when we're looking at this as a unified field's laws, set of laws, so to speak, we have something where our nation is different because our nation basically is primarily based upon judeo-christian belief systems. But here we have a lot of things that basically go far deeper in people's various types of realities. So, if we're doing more of a quantitative understanding into this to deal with how we understand the quantum signatures of everything, we have to get into different things. I'm going to talk about a paper that I was doing, and I sent in a short to the Nobel to see if there was an interest in it. And I informed them that I did not have a formal sheepskin. And their response was, "Your paper is very exciting. We need a complete paper immediately." And the interesting thing here is that I actually had some people show up, so to speak, from the government that said, "Well, about your paper, the full paper version of that, we would kind of appreciate it if you didn't release the full paper because it could be a problem for national security. Would you agree with that?" And I says, "Well, given the present situation of what we have in play for countermeasures respective to this disclosing of information at this particular time, uh, I actually included in my paper the actual problems respective to what might be a problem." And here I seem to have a response from the government that indicates that they do think that it's a problem. This means that we don't have our counter equipment manufactured yet for the paper to be safely unveiled upon the world. A little complex. In other words, we don't have the right monitoring equipment, we don't have the right rapid deployment forces, we don't have the right equipment equipping our rapid deployment forces to be able to deal with the type of problems that can manifest. And this is in many areas, so to speak. And this would include things such as, in my quantitative layout of spiritual physics, we're basically looking at the entire galactic spectrum of understanding, where I'm laying out the understanding that basically it's not what I would call a true simulation, but we're in a matrix. It's a fixed matrix. We're in relegend. So this is something that if you're looking at legend, we're in it, and it keeps changing. And the reason that it's legend is because there's a consciousness respective to an understanding of the full scope of the nature of our galaxy, of the nature of ourselves. And this is something that some people have natural abilities in, so to speak, to understand certain symmetries and different things. And then you get into things like the attosecond, that's the European discovery. And then, of course, I was also introducing something else because I've seen many types. I was introducing the all-second, which was quite different. And this is a very big item to explain the all-second and why there is a consciousness to it. So, here we have something about the natural temporal awareness respective to human beings on the whole, because this is really a complex understanding of things. Now, with this respective paper, at the moment here, I couldn't lay this whole thing out. It's a large, very large paper to lay out for people, basically. And it has a lot of formulas that explain the equative understanding of a whole lot of things, so to speak. Now, these also, because they're generalized math formulas, they pertain to science. They pertain to the entire balance of faith, law, spiritualism. This means that we have a full roundedness of understanding of medical orientation, psychological orientation, the actual various existences of E-based knowledge itself. So with the paper I'm laying out, I lay out that the fact that E itself, energy, has a consciousness. Energy is alive. Energy is intelligent. And this happens to be something that is way groundbreaking for somebody to say, wait a minute, you're saying that energy has intelligence. This is something that people just basically didn't do. So when you go to a quantitative understanding in these respects, you're talking about a massive, wide scope of understanding. It's a lot of material to grab a hold of and then try to work it into the balance. And there's a lot of different intricacies to the mathematics to understand the different sub-areas of the balance. So if we're going into the various understanding at different spiritual levels, we end up with dealing with people's faith basically at different levels, and this is, like really important for people to basically understand that way. So here we have a lot of wide scope understanding about what various things actually can be. If we're going to get into different forms of quantitative language, some of us do things that other people don't necessarily. So here we actually have many other types of ways of looking at a lot of this stuff. And why is it important here? Now, these deep psychological understandings deal with many realms of material. So I'm going to tell you, you really need to hang on to your seat because we're going to go for a ride. Because we have some very deep stuff that we need to cover. Because literally, when we're coming into covering different forms of the cognitive map of human beings and the relationship now to mass models, we have a lot of things to work with. We're definitely dealing with very heavy device sciences. And this is something that basically people are deeply concerned about. Because dealing with an incredible deepness of equating a master device, a master system of compute, so to speak, that is going to be full-ranged understanding as to spiritualities, then we're dealing with a lot of different zones of understanding that people need to grip. And there's something about what people need to understand, respective to actions. People are involved in different types of activity and actions. We also have the differences of policies and actions. So we can deal with a whole lot of different ways of how we're going to arrange our different devices and understand the workings of our devices and how many of them we put together and what all of this is going to look like, and what is the cross-symmetry value of unified fields laws. So yeah, we need these big, huge, massive devices to be able to help us equate all of these things out, because it's rather complex. So we have our Constitution of the United States, and it's very important to understand what this document is, what it means, what is behind it, what happened before the Constitution. By the way, we're on Constitution number 5. There's 4 previous constitutions. And there are documents, laws, and agreements that predate that are endorsed by the Constitution. And I'm going to explain more about that as well. Why here now on planet Earth things mean what they mean and why they're so important, why we're at that crucial crossroads. So understanding the tactical table is crucial if we're looking at what our forefathers did. basically. They did a whole lot of tactical table work. The old-fashioned way, they brought out tables and papers and maps and little tiny figures and pieces and whatever they could find. Today we might use nuts and bolts in the military, but our forefathers used different symbols. I mean, if you were a kid, you might have noticed that there's some creative things that you can use as real-time strategy accoutrements, basically. So obviously we have all these different concerns where people are concerned about paying off the national debt. How do we run our finances? And of course, the understanding of economy is crucial to everything. If you don't have the right amount of money in your wallet, things may not go the way you, need them to go. So, here we have these different understandings, and people are coming to the conclusion, finally, that data is intelligent. So this is something that my papers laid out. I had that in spades. So literally, when we're dealing with understanding this vast knowledge, we have to have these massive archives to be able to traverse through them. Now, anyone that's a preacher, for instance, that has a church, understands that there's one book. There's one important book above all the rest. This is obvious. But that doesn't mean it's the only book. People will talk about different things. They need to relate to different things. So if we're going to talk about how is it that the Bible has an incredible understanding of guidance when you look at certain understanding of prophecy, because you have people now that are sitting there going, yes, we have finally come to the finalization of a certain age. We are in apex. The new beginning is the option that we have before us. But then again, is there going to be a new beginning? Or is this a final apex? Are we going to break the toy? Are we going to blow the ball apart? These are important items to understand. So if we're continuing trying to understand what is going on with apexes, what is going on with what God is trying to tell us. Those of us who are sensitive, who are tied to the consciousness of heaven itself. As literally energy is intelligent, but guess what? There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio. Yes, things are very complex. So we have to deal with the tactical table sciences of what certain realities are, and we have to step up to the plate. We have to participate in law. We have to participate in protecting the Constitution of the United States. It's just one of those things that we basically are stuck with. We have to do this. Like it or not, we have responsibilities. Because we have this, we're at a series of different types of quantification. So people are now wondering, is God the general operational directory? Or is this a more contextual item? Are there many other contexts respective to compressed word understanding? Do we have our government as a general operational godlike governance? Are we fighting Russia that might be an American godlike governance? These are very deep and important questions. As it would seem at the moment, the reality is there are serious problems. People are thinking, hey, some of these things ain't necessarily working out. And we're in trouble here. We're in big trouble. There's a lot of things that people are concerned with. They're scared to death about certain people's research with AI. So we have a big understanding. People are deeply concerned. How is this final cone on top of the pyramid of what we have made with our hands going to turn out? How is this going to pan out? And some of us really wonder, are we going to get a chance to be able to control this great spiritual device as well as all of these other incredibly powerful mechanisms. How is the device stuff going to work out for us? It's a big question. Because it's important to understand that if you're doing things to actually make large language model or mass language models, and have controllers where you can control them the same way that you would see multimedia controllers at a mass level at a large news center. So many of us, we really need to understand tactical tables, and they're changing significantly. I know they are because I have designs that are mind-boggling of how to do things, how to manipulate mass language models, how to deal with things at incredible levels. Mass economic modeling. So it's of key importance to understand that there's a lot of ways that we can build devices and control them. But are we ourselves in a great device? A great device that is a much larger scope, a true full scope item. This is actually crucially important because the awareness of this and the practice of exploring this is of the deepest importance to all of us. Now, yes, I am running for governor in California. Michael Crosby, hello. I'm running for governor of California. And I usually run for either governor or president. And there are a lot of things that are very important. There's a lot of things that have happened over the course of time because we have been involved in great spiritual battles. And it's important to understand this. Because at the moment, we're kind of sort of in trouble still. We need to do repairs. Now, my archives and vast research indicate a great many things. We made deals. We made deals and we're supposed to be wealthy, really wealthy. We have the original contract to guarantee us unlimited access to the United States Treasury. So because I'm, part of the original line of stewards, of forefathers, it's different because I listen to other people who think they understand law, they think they understand the Constitution, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Because my bloodline relates back to the most simplistic understanding. My bloodline was there. And we had our own militia. And we had our own participations. And we had our own contracts that we had to have endorsed, respective to the Constitution, or the deal's off. We're not involved. Just that simple. Now, some of us were different. Some of us were like, well, we're not necessarily into slavery. We don't see why anybody should be a slave, actually. If somebody's going to do an indentured contract, well, that's one thing. But after a certain amount of time, they can't be indentured anymore, and they have to be well paid. The contract must have a payout. There needs to be land, there needs to be lumber, there needs to be homes, there needs to be a really nice deal, and there needs to be a lump sum of money at the end, and hey, you have to have money to buy kids candy along the way, so you got to have a little bit of an income each week. That's a proper, respectful contract. By today's standards, you would be working 4 years and getting a home, several acres of land, maybe 20, and you would end up, owning your own ranchette, so to speak. After 4 years, you would have $300,000 or $400,000 in the bank cash. You would own your land outright. You would have moving crop deals going. Of course, you might have had a little difference. You might have been a blacksmith or have these different skills. So you might have parlayed your vision of what you wanted into something else. You might be running a lumber mill. You might have a furniture business, something, whatever that is. And these things are of key importance. So we live in this point in time, basically, where there were these existing contracts, and some of these contracts have been violated, and violated really, really big. I mean, for instance, here's a big one, folks. You have to know this one. The government had no money to do the great land purchases. The government's something we made. That's us. We made that. Okay. We're the bosses. We're the stockholders. We have a republic. A republic. Not a democracy. We have a republic. So when the government stepped up and says some of us have run into an understanding that we can buy out these other entities and be the sole owner on these great land purchases, so to speak, to be the big main controller, to control the territory. That means we're going to control the treasury appraisal of new hard assets generated, and be able to also together manage and facilitate the best options in a civilized way for all people, basically. So the deal was the government had no money, and they said, well, we have a mechanism. We can't go door to door, but we have this mechanism called taxes. We can do a temporary tax, but the real reason for this is for you to step up and buy stock. You're investors, you're buying stock, you're going to get residuals off the minerals. You're going to get dividends from the deal's done. In other words, the government already has plans to invite certain people in and give them a certain amount of this land. They're going to create jobs, and there's going to be some simple money put forward, and we get a cut. And we also get land staking and all this. Now the modern version is that we still hold the stock and we still have certain types of voting rights, but this is a steward thing. Okay, this is a private business deal as well as kind of combining with government. Why? See, we have kind of done something. We decided to take government and do a brand new experiment. We're making republic, and we're going to kind of merge an East Indies style company to help facilitate all of us in trade for growth, for forward movement, for prosperity itself. So the modern equative value to our land stock is basically having a stock that now has extended capabilities, will make blockchains, will do all these wonderful things. I've modernized the entire construct to build a brand new option, an incredible brand new option. And basically, this is what I consider part of the standard upgrade. It's time for the great lift, and restoring the true origin contracts that we have done, and kick people out of the country that are diabolically opposed to our contract, to the Constitution. And of course, the Constitution endorses colonial constitutional capitalism, which is a blend of ethics and beliefs to do certain things so long as it all comes together the same way. If people come up and they don't come together the same way, well, they're not welcome to vote. Say, we have a system we've engineered, and it's all about voting on new growth, new deals, basically, ways to get things done. And further, the idea here is to continue to promote prosperity. That is the original meaning of welfare. So this is the understanding, welfare. Welfare. So, you go to the fair, it's a market fair, and people have fair, good prices. You can make good deals. So this is something that we wanted to keep promoting, whatever it was. And developing real estate was key. In fact, it was considered mandatory by our forefathers. It's a standard right of people to be able to use their own hands to build homes. This means that all of us in the beginning basically, definitely, would be cohesive to Christ the carpenter type of philosophies. That was crucial. So there's actually a quantitative ethical construct to this, and the interesting thing is they're virtually identical to many Christian Judeo understandings. There's a merger between law, ethics, faith, and science. It all converges. In fact, you usually have triangulative group cluster conversions that justify this. And again, this all pertains also to our spiritual well-being. It's crucially important. So here I have something that I've also been working on. It's a huge mass model, basically. It is something that is an artificial professional executive device, a mass digital inventing system. This is something to help us out with anything that we can possibly imagine. It gives us all of the options to be able to go to forums, to meet with people in different types of groups and do what we want to do. This is a grand structured digital item. So if we're going to understand that there are variances, that there are key major differences in our nation, we primarily are two parties. This is kind of pretty much how it's been. We had different parties, and sometimes parties end. Sometimes there's problems. We did have the Civil War. The Democrats started the Civil War. This is part of the facts of history. They seceded and then they attacked the Union. So here we have what actually, by our forefathers, was supposed to be a continuous competition of who comes up with the best deals. Who's going to come up with the best forward-moving growth? The word we need to address as the number one priority is prosperity, because within prosperity itself, that is a wide scope item. It's a cluster of many things. My view is, as stewards, we need to keep proceeding forward. But there are problems. And part of the problem is I've been trying to book mass economic modeling for a number of years. So in 2005, as I was beginning my presidential campaign, I wanted us to be investing $4 to $6 billion a year as stewards, and basically force the government to also do the same thing. And people laughed at me. They laughed at me. And now we have nations such as China spending about $187 billion each year to something that is tied into and associated with mass economic modeling. Now, these things are crucially important because we basically are in that huge world participation. And frankly, there are a great many concerns. We have huge populations in India and China, for instance, that are very competitive. And we have to be able to compete and hold our own if we're going to maintain our personal security structure. It's of key importance. So whether you're somebody of ethics and you're dealing with things such as the understanding of the integrated cognitive biosignature oversighting, which is quite a thing for us to do, each of us ourselves, because spiritually we have to still do these things that are of the greatest importance. So we literally have a situation when we're dealing with what's going on in people's minds around the world. Is there a lot of greed? What in fact is going on with all the numbers? How does this pan out? We need a quantitative reality to this. And the surprising thing is the quantitative reality, again, repeatedly keeps coming into a triangulative structure of once again joining with the scope of faith, law, and science. It's a continuous thing in our thinking processes, and it keeps coming together again and again. So for me, it's easy to come up with the quantitative approach respective to all of this. So we need to understand more about what's going on in different people's minds. It's deeply concerning. We see the effects every day. Someplace there's violence, someplace there's this, someplace there's that. And there's a lot more to understanding that we've fought two great wars with the Royal German Empire spy department, whether you realize it or not. This group of people is also a syndicate, which is much larger than just the universities, the institutes, the department buildings. And there's a long-term clandestine plan that they involved themselves in. They did a lot of things, basically. And it's very important because we need to understand what's going on in their brains and other people's brains as well. Let's proceed. So basically, we need to understand more about operating our own cognitive maps, basically. This is something that's inescapable because we have to control our emotions. So today we have a lot of different cognitive things that we have to understand the deep relationships with. We have many categories that we have to deal with, and we have to police some of them. This is pretty much obvious to many people to understand. So we're back to understanding a key point, and that is archiving. If you don't have archiving, there's no way for you to keep the things that are important and be able to manage everything. And all the really interesting people have archives. They have bookcases in the background. You'll see them on Zoom. They'll do shows. I guarantee you that all people that are interesting usually have archives. It's kind of goes with the main territory. And constitutionally, archives are protected. It is considered a great crime against humanity for anyone to attack archives. And that's exactly what has happened in California. It's far more than just attacks upon elections. We have attacks upon archives. We have parties who have violated national security at levels that are mind-boggling. And there's more an equative understanding to understand what it is they've done. It's right there if you want to take your time and start working with the material. So when we have things that happen, when we have archives that come under attack, and we have evidence that is surfacing in various areas, and we have other players that are doing things, they're violating the Constitution, they're inventing policies, they're rigging the elections, they're rigging the game, they're saying, we're deciding that no prosecutions or investigations whatsoever of anybody who's a government employee can occur. Welcome to California. That means a complete shutout. That means these people are completely rigging the elections. And then they involve themselves in mass demographic attacks. These are, again, mass economic sabotage. That is unconstitutional. In fact, it's listed as a mandatory death penalty item. Yet we have these people that just keep persisting in doing these things. Now here's something that's kind of interesting because we have some other elections. We had a recall election. People wanted to recall Governor Newsom. Now the problem with this is that they didn't want to allow people to run for office in California. They didn't want a lot of people running for office because they felt that would dilute the situation and cause Governor Newsom to be defeated. So I was blacklisted from being able to participate. Now, based upon the equative understanding of the content of my archive, my build-up and my mobile archive systems, the computer came up with different types of relative estimates in line with what other candidates would have done, how things should have occurred and performed. So it came up with a completely different set of statistical understanding. And this is, again, because parties have rigged the elections. So we're going back several elections, and it's important to understand how they did it. It's crucial, because we're going to get into a deep understanding of Marxism. And if we're getting into Marxism, I'm going to get into that part where I explain to you about these philosophies, the origin of these philosophies, who worked on them, who developed them, who made them into what they are. How many people have died in relationship to these inventions, literal mechanisms of mass destruction? Modern law definitely would identify them as a RICO, organized crime. So we need to proceed forward. Where we have certain parties who have involved themselves in illegal activity. Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State of California, is supposed to have taken an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States and protect the California Constitution and protect the process of elections. Yet she has refused her duties. Literally violence occurring against myself, my archives. Eventually, an entire fleet, 34 vehicles, is destroyed during this COVID election sequence. Literally, there's a vast array of artifacts. We're talking old books, old constitutional papers, all kinds of stuff. Here we have an artifact. This one is 900 years old. It's the only one known in the world. It happens to have blood on it. It is believed to be Incan, actually, although you would find that similar beliefs involving Incan, Aztec, Mayan, etc., have similar belief structures. And it's very interesting because here we have different people utilizing different belief structures. And we're going to talk more about it because what they're involving themselves in is something called temporal warfare. So here we have some interesting occurrences of things we need to understand. We have violence in Mexico. In fact, we have a lot of violence in Mexico. A whole lot of violence in Mexico. And this is something that is really very serious to understand. You have a drug dealer that was effectively, they were arresting him. He ended up getting killed. Now, here we have a lot of understanding where the violence keeps continuing, and it's really, really a problem. And it's an example to us to see how dangerous things can get when you're dealing with bad players. So again, we have significant violence that has occurred in Mexico. So there's more violence. We have people, when we're looking at things that are unique, that connect to the Royal German Empire. These are crucially important to understand that they had these basically spy departments, and they involved themselves in a lot of activities. So you would have these different people that basically were participating in super spydom, and their business also dealt with many rooms, many books, many tactical tables, as the spy departments basically were very big on doing things in their idea of their personal clandestine destiny. So here we have a situation where dealing with people's psychological understanding, dealing with people's deep spiritual constructs, is important because we have here an opportunity to understand that some of us know something about things. So this is a good reason for people, by the way, to go to church. If you haven't been to church and you haven't read the book, you might need to do that. So it's very important to understand how we have these belief systems of different types of beliefs that have a multi-temporal understanding. These super spiritual beliefs of energies and spirits and whatnot. And if you read the Bible, it's going to tell you a lot about these various entities. So here we have energy entities that are intelligent, spirits, so to speak. Now with large language models, we're now at the door where people are experimenting and discovering things that some of us already knew. My quantitative research respective to spiritualism was rather thorough, actually. So to understand things about temporal sciences is a big one, because I was also studying how to do faster than light communications very, very successfully. So understanding other things such as quantum aperture technologies, types of equipment-assisted remote viewing. Again, I actually had some really good success. So I basically had the type of research, the quantitative equations, to be able to move forward with understanding far more about what's going on in people's heads and how people's heads are affected by bad players, for instance. Oh, there's a lot of things. We can learn about the good players, the good things, but at the moment we need to talk about bad players for a while. So if we're going to properly understand the full scope of spiritual physics, we have to understand the bad players. Again, I'm sorry I don't have 3 weeks to make a intensive, 5-hour a day series of classes every day for 3 weeks for you. But I am basically wrapped up into things that are nation business. We're in trouble. Things need to be repaired. So it's important for me to move forward and convey key items of importance. Now, you're going to have to rely more upon your local spiritual consultants to help you understand more about the things I'm talking about. This is what a lot of them do. For many of these people, it's their chosen job, and many of them are very good at it. But that's something that we all individually decide for ourselves. We have free choice, which place we're going to go to, etc. So if we get into things like prophecy, and we're getting into the ability to look across time and space, these are really big spiritual items. So understanding the important ones are actually crucial. Generally in life, what's mostly important to most people growing up is to understand love and to understand wisdom and to understand how to move forward with prosperity, yet be generous in life as you go through life. But we come to certain times where certain things are a problem. We have to do things. That's when we have such things as great war. And we've had 2 really big great wars. Basically, we were forced to get involved to deal with the European problem. And the European problems really are kind of interesting. There's a lot of them, you could say, but some of them are small, but sometimes they get out of control. And this is when you end up talking about Royal German Empire exploits and their various junior oligarch participants. So again, at this point, I'm not even talking about the big bankers and talking about how that's all financed. Everybody wants to move on to that. They don't want to cover the smaller cog areas, because if they go to the details of it, you start finding things out. You find out that basically Royal German Empire spies were people like Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Karl Marx, and that there was a long-term commitment by the spy department to begin their processes that began about 1840 to get really serious. Between 1840 and 1860, there was major changes in what they were doing. They were deeply penetrating into every category of knowledge that there was. Every university, every doctor's association. And they proceeded forward with this until we ended up into the Great War situation. There's a lot of things that they involved themselves in that people need to understand. That they did something. They took information. They paid doctors to go out and study people. They got doctors to give them all of their data, all of their information on their patients. People will tell their doctors anything. So those patient files were real big homes. They reworked information and they sold it many, many times, making profit just in those areas alone. It was kind of a really brilliant exploit. The revelation that data, information, could be valuable, that you could consistently change data, especially when you got mass amounts of data, into new products. The ability to make books about sales and how to do sales pitches, demographic information as to where to go to make the sales, key information about demographics of people, all of this into very customized approaches. But there's other information like where people live, how much money they have, what their political beliefs are. The list goes on. It's rather extensive. So you had the Royal German Empire Spy Department basically fashion various types of maps and information in a condensed manner, handing it over to Lenin. They gave him $10 million at that time, which today would be like $4.5 billion. And they sent 3,700 black ops guys that acted as though invisible agents around the structure. They sent them into Russia. They wanted to destabilize Russia because their clandestine plans had Russia as the number one target to be a problem because they wanted to take over Europe. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the United States was actually the number 2 target. They saw that if they could keep both Russia and the United States out of the equation, that they could take over all of Europe and then continue to expand more. This was part of their clandestine plan. Now, many people today don't understand in the United States about these extra creations, how the Royal German Empire Spy Department worked with their other partners. They did lots of deals where they said, we'll go in 50-50, we'll split it, we'll be fair. Fair. Lots of deals, split. And here we have activities that literally span the world. Here we have them paying people to create material. So you have the Royal German Spy Department engineer psychological attacks, psychological matrices, invent things that have the appeal as though it's a Bible, as though it's a faith, a religion, claim it to be of high ethics, but control how the nature of the entire construct is and keep a dictatorial core. So you can always control this mechanism. Therefore, you could puppet it. You could wield it as though a weapon of mass destruction. Kind of a different mechanism, a different device than some people might think of. So into this, they got the data, and they stole data as well. They took any kinds of works. They took the works of information that was fading away in history, and they reworked it with stealing information from the best writers in the world, as well as doctors' data, who made all those observations of people's average, everyday lives. Basically, they sat down, and one of the key things they worked with is to look at the symmetry of people's lives and add up and say, what are the commonality factors about people's lives? Let's work this into an understanding of working with these commonalities, and we will create a new mechanism we call communism. Although the term had been creatively created far in the past by someone, and that information faded away, they weaponized it. They did something new. They revamped it. They revived it. They decided to make a brand new mechanism. And actually, they did many mechanisms. Communism, socialism. They decided to puppet all players. They would send money to all the different groups, get them politically involved, and then start pulling money from some of the different groups so that those smaller groups would be consumed or fade away. Therefore, they would continuously re-up with money till they're eventually with the people who win, regardless of which side they're on. And say, yes, we've been your buddy all along, you know this, to get the best possible leveraging options. This is who they were. This is what they did. They did a lot of things inside the United States that some people are yet to understand. But we have examples of what they did all over the world. Basically, they're drug dealers. They made deals with chemical plants and pharmaceutical companies. And they says, look, we need a leverage here. Give us a whole lot of these narcotics that you're making wholesale. Give us these pharmaceuticals at cost or below cost. Be partners with us, and we'll share all the data that we're getting. And the chemical plants and pharmaceutical companies thought this was a great deal. So they were involved. So here you have mass information getting a hold of, and all along the way you have all these different mechanisms that were being studied, pushed, redesigned. When you look at Karl Marx, for instance, all of his work is actually what's known as a construct. Basically, his work was passed back and forth between him, other people, and the Royal German Spy Department. They also had an institute and a university. So basically, that information is a construct that dealt with many people engineering it. The Royal German Empire Spy Department basically had hundreds of people every day working on projects. And sometimes they'd come together and do master tactical table manipulations, using themselves like human computers to do mass manipulations. So if you can imagine going into court and there's one or two or maybe three judges, maybe nine, the way they would do it is they would have over 200 people playing the role of all sides. That means they'd be playing the role of the judges and all the other sides to manipulate a maximum understanding of all points. Master multiple tactical table understanding manipulations. So they would send information back out. Here, Carl, here you go. This is the material that you need to work with. So they slowly invented mechanisms, communism, socialism. They used different players to involve getting people together, and they were the ultimate parties to find every possible way that they could salvage making a buck out of it. Having additional players, additional schemes and scams. They were doing business. And doing drug dealing was part of their business. And sadly, we see an interesting series of examples of how sometimes some players involved in drug dealing, could end up getting involved in very spiritually dangerous areas. And we see the violence. With the Royal German Empire, they were going after the big, huge plan. They were going after spying. They were going after trying to hide their long-term invention of submarine pack attack systems. So they would lie to people. They'd do false narratives to the British government. these submarines, they're actually dumb, but we're just, some of these people want to experiment with stuff. Come on, these are no match to a British warship or a British fleet. Come on. These things are death traps. Look what happened with the Americans. The cannonballs would bounce off those metal turrets and those metal submarines, and the shock, the acoustic sound shock, would destroy people's nervous systems. What a cruel thing to do to your service people, to ruin them, to maim them, to kill them in such a manner. That's horrible. So the British would laugh and say, yeah, you're right. But there's more to these things than people would know. We had filament winding understanding, where we would incorporate cork to absorb vibration. But this was both time-consuming and expensive, and during the Civil War, we needed an answer right away. So metal was chosen. And we actually scared nations. They saw what we did, and this was a quantum leap forward. Although it was an experiment that seemingly failed, it scared people because it was a big, huge forward step. The American Civil War. Metal gun turrets and metal submarines. A big step forward. So now we're coming down to the hour. I'm going to do a part 2. I'm going to talk deeper about the spiritual nature of various people's belief systems. And I'm going to include into this false spirits. The nature of false spirits, because what we end up having is a creation. Marxism is a false spirit. These people literally are taking the philosophy of Karl Marx and sucking it right into their brain and walking around. And people see them, yeah, there's another Marxist. Yeah, they got Marx in their head. Now, the understanding in long-range prophecy consideration to understand this spiritual psychology and the falseness of these belief systems, because they're constructs. They're not true, earnest, honest belief systems. They're implying that they are ethical, but these are actually tainted. They are false belief systems. They invoke a false spirit. And it's crucial to understand this. And I want to get in more into this for you in part 2, because we need to understand what some of these people are doing, how they play the game, and how they've been attacking the United States for well over 100 years. Because we have a bunch of crazy, evil, false-spirited people that are trying to destroy our nation. They're trying to distract you with a bunch of falsities instead of focusing on what? We need to focus on what? On my plan, as I run for governor, why? Well, we need to do it nationwide, but a lot of things. My archive has a vast diversity, at least it did, before it was getting attacked. Now, the understanding is, as we look at the golden upward curve, the great lift in restoring the contract, in restoring the deals we did, in restoring our rights, in restoring our stock. This is a restoration. We need to step back into what? Colonial constitutional capitalism. We're going to step back into capitalism, and we're going to eject these people who are invaders and get them out of the way and not allow them to sabotage our prosperity. This is of key importance, because as you look at this golden curve I put out here, it's way different. The numbers involving what other candidates are proposing as far as affecting your wallet would be all the way down flatlined at the bottom of this image. I'm not even joking here. This is a quantum leap to say, let's merely restore capitalism. We'll talk more about it in part 2. Again, my name is Michael Crosby, and yes, I am running for governor of California.